Thank you all. I have to say, I'm from Boston, and listening to these speakers, I know nothing about software. And as we in Boston would say, you people are wicked smart. But what I want to talk about this morning is change. And I don't know if we can raise the lights just for a minute. Has anyone in this room ever been frustrated about creating change at work? And if you have, can you stand up? Has anyone ever hit obstacles at work? Yes, yes. Okay. All right, so while you're still standing, I want, or sit down, but I'm going to ask people to stand again. Often what people get frustrated with is change is fear. And we don't have a lot of time this morning, but my question to you is, what has stopped you? So has anyone ever held back because they were afraid that their idea might hurt their reputation or career? Anyone? You want to raise your hands? Anyone ever afraid of they might upset their boss? You want to raise their hands? Okay. Those are the two biggest reasons. So what I want to talk about in our short time together are three things. One is sort of the mindset for creating change. One are some skills, and the third is self-care. Because often when we start changing, we become obsessed. So let's get right into it. First of all, people say, what's with this rebel thing? What do you mean by rebel? It sounds so negative. And by rebel, what we mean when we use this word are sort of positive change makers. We are rebelling against what no longer works, but really being quite positive on providing solutions versus just being troublemakers and whining about problems. So sometimes as good rebels, we get frustrated and we sort of fall into the bad rebel part. But for the most part, these are what I mean by good rebel. Just some context. Okay, so let me talk about some common fears to start with. The first thing is assumptions, right? They hold us back. Last week, I talked to a woman who was thinking about leaving her job. And she said, there's no way in my company that they'll approve this idea. And it's a really important idea. And I said, how do you know that? She's like, well, I know they don't go for these things. And I said, do this. Go back and talk to your boss. She went back, she talked to her boss, and her boss said, we've been thinking about that idea. And she is now able to move ahead with the idea. So sometimes our assumptions hold us back. We're afraid. The second thing is, in whatever position we have, is to address our boss's fears. Don't you love this Vince Vaughn stock photography? So what do our bosses, when we think about what our bosses are worried about, right? I mean, and if we understand what they worry about, we can tailor our ideas to make them less worried. Our bosses don't want to look bad in front of their bosses. They want to avoid criticism. They don't want to waste time. So when we understand what these things are, we can tailor our ideas accordingly. I'll show you how. The other thing that's really useful is, why do bosses say no to ideas? Usually, the biggest thing is often it's just not that important. The other thing is we get so wrapped up. I don't know about you, but sometimes I've gotten so wrapped up in ideas that I just thought was brilliant. I started explaining how everything would work, and my boss just sat there and said, Lois, what are you talking about? So what's the what? Sometimes it's bad timing that our bosses say no. Sometimes they don't like the idea and don't know how to tell us. And often bosses just like things the way they are. So it's helpful to know the why. One of the most important pieces of advice I can share with you as it comes to fears and creating change is, don't go it alone. When we're creating change, this is, I'm so sick of people talking about, the hero's journey. And really, we are always more effective when we have a rebel pack, right? People who are with us can help us, and together we make the ideas better. Now, there's another reason why this is really important. When 10% of the people in any organization or company or town or society get behind and believe in an idea, the idea will be adopted, right? That's like really big. If there are 300 people in your organization and you want it to tip to this new idea, all you need to get are 30 people to be with you, right? If there are 1,000 people, you need 100. So as we create our rebel pack of people who have the same ideas, who are helping us, who are out there talking about the idea, we are more likely to get the idea approved. 10%. In skills, what skills are important? One thing is sensing what's going on in the organization. What's kind of bubbling up? As people have meetings, what new terms are they using? What are people saying? You should learn about this. What's being put in budgets? As we sense what's going on and really understand what's going on, it will help us position our ideas to what people find important. The other thing with any organization, too, is understanding how things work. When are decisions made? So if most decisions for new projects are made in June, and that's when the budgets are locked down, if you come in May with your idea, it may be too late. So just understand how things get done. Second thing in skills is to make friends with the bureaucratic black belts. Now, these are the people who really understand how things work and are often the people who say no and look for all the reasons not to do something. In my career, most of my career has been in marketing, and I've always found like the BBBs that I really had to make friends with were the legal people. So who are the BBBs that you need to get to know? Often we end up communicating, having lunch, talking to the people who agree with us. It's equally as important to get to know the people who don't agree with you and build relationships with them. So I would just challenge you when you go back to work, who are 2 or 3 BBBs who you could have lunch with? Second skill is communications. When we're communicating new ideas, there are 3 really important things. One is what's at stake? Why does it matter? The second is what could be, paint a picture of what could be. And the third thing is to show it can work. What's at stake? How will things be better? And instill some confidence that you know what you're doing. And the higher up you move in the approval chain, the more succinct you want those ideas to be. The other thing with an idea is you need to frame your idea so people understand what you're talking about. And I think in technology, it's often easy to get caught up in the details of the technology. And when you're then talking to business decision makers, it's like there's a different language being spoken. So there's a great book on screenwriting and how to pitch a screenplay. And I would say an advice works for us too, is to frame your ideas that people understand. Fast Company was trying to get funding back in the 80s, they said it's a new magazine that sort of mashes up, Harvard Business Review and Rolling Stone magazine. And people said, oh, that's kind of interesting. I was working with a big Fortune 50 company, and they were trying to get $10 million approved for a social intranet. And people said, what is this? I don't understand it. And people said, well, it's sort of like if SharePoint and Facebook had a love child, this is what you would get. So kind of silly, but people understood. Prove it can work. This is probably, you probably understand this part in proving it can work, right? To just kind of be proactive and to kind of tick through these elements. The one thing that really gets in the way of change, and we all sort of run from it, is conflict and disagreement, because there is nothing ever changes without some sort of disagreement or conflict. And most of the time, it makes us very, very uncomfortable, so we run from it. And the more we avoid conflict, the longer and more prolonged the effort to get something either yay or nay goes on. So I would say with conflict, it's really important to learn how to listen, to ask people what the real issue is. You know, if it's not going well, if you say to someone, I get the sense that you don't like this idea. Can you tell me what's in the way? Be very direct in asking them. Ask people for alternative solutions. If people are like shooting down your ideas and poking holes in everything that's wrong with it, to say, just be calm, that's interesting. How would you solve this? What are your ideas? And open up that conversation. Master the meeting. I could spend like an hour on that one. But learning how to master the meeting is important. And also knowing how to sort of strategically address bullies. And there's a way to do that, to call their bluff and sort of, I guess this doesn't sound very nice to say cut them off at the knees, but I don't know what the polite way to say that, but to really master the bullies so that they don't master you. Okay, so fears, skills. As I'm talking to people about change, this seems to be the self-care so important to people, and we don't think about it. How do we take care of ourselves so we don't burn out? And how do we know what to do when we have been thrown under the bus? So first of all, I'd like to just encourage you to express gratitude about what is going well at work. Know that if you're put in the penalty box, it's a way to kind of step back and look at what's going on, and you'll be able to come out of it. And to sort of have friends outside of work and not to get obsessed, because when you get obsessed, you can no longer see. So I'm going to talk about if you get thrown under the bus, and this will happen, go under the radar for a while, reassess, find a new boss, and look at should you quit. When should you quit? The two most important things of should you quit after you've sort of really pushed a big idea through. One is, have you just lost any support at all? And if no one has your back, it's probably a good time to leave. And the second thing, if there are no opportunities to learn, then it's time to leave. So last thing I want to leave you with is in creating change, never lose your sense of optimism. Optimism is the greatest act of rebellion. And optimistic, positive people attract other people to their rebel pack. So please do it together and be brave. The world needs new ideas. Thank you very much.